thank you to all the people that like, I wish I could say thank you to all people that try to like believe in somebody when they look like they're a train wreck. Because there's all like, I mean, most of your stories, they're of train wrecks in progress. And I'm so happy and so grateful that I got to come out of it with an intact brain and a life worth living. And I did it by the time I was 25. Not everyone gets that. And I often forget how rare that is. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to God and everyone that was involved that I got here.
All right, Josh.
Yes, sir.
Josh, where are you from originally? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Sydney, Ohio, and then when I turned 7, my family moved to Columbus area, and I grew up in Plain City, for the most part. When we moved here, it's because my dad he needed a place closer to his job, and he was driving like 90 minutes to get to work.
How would you describe your childhood?
I grew up in like a middle of nowhere when I was 7, and then moved to suburbs. But my family, I have older brother, younger brother, and a younger sister. And as we grew up, we kind of like all kind of drifted in our own personalities, despite all growing up together. We're all very, very different. And where we lived, it was kind of like where I live now, you have to worry about like getting hit by a car. You have to worry about getting a lot more like, there are a lot of influences. But out there, it's like you're in the middle of nowhere. Our dog, none of our dogs were on leashes. And then as we grew up, like both my parents, when we lived in Plain City, we always took our dogs out on a leash. But back in Sydney, our dogs were never on leashes. When I was 5, my mom like would babysit kids because my mom's a chemistry teacher at a high school. But back then she was not working because she had to take care of three or four kids. My mom would babysit this girl that came over for. She would babysit this girl that came over for like after school, before school, and well, back then it was preschool. And when we were kids, we kind of like, our parents kind of left us by ourselves a lot. I mean, they were in the house, but they left us by ourselves. And I kind of remember this very vividly, but I don't remember a lot of what I was doing. I liked this girl, she liked me, and we were the same age, and we would we had like a bunk bed. In my family, like my parents never had a lot of money, so even when we moved to Plain City, we would sleep like 3 guys in a bunk bed, like 2 on top, 1 on bottom, or vice versa. And so back in Sydney, me and this girl, we would like get under the bunk bed and take our clothes off and like make out. And I look back on that a lot thinking, how did I know to know those things?
How old were you?
5.
5.
Yeah. And I've talked to a lot of psychiatrists, but they're like, oh, it's natural curiosity. I'm like, I've never heard anyone else. I've heard other people, they want to show me yours, show me mine, which I did that once later on in life. But from very early age, I was already promiscuous with somebody. And to be clear, it was like, there wasn't a forced interaction at all. We both liked each other, and it frustrates me in my head to not know why. Some people will tell you, especially if you have a dissociative identity disorder or something like that, you don't need to know. And if you force knowing, it can be destructive. But for me, it's very frustrating because I want to know why I knew to know to want to do or try those things. But I wasn't really sexual after that, after we moved to at all, until in second grade, I was like on the computer at our local library in Plain City, and somebody, like I was trying to play RuneScape, the MMORPG, and like I got ads and they were porn. Just how a lot of kids kind of get into porn. And I grew up in a Christian household, Assemblies of God, which is kind of Pentecostal, but without the skirts and the misogyny. And that might be a little harsh. But AG is a little bit more like we're charismatic, but it's not forced. And it's more about just listening to what God has to say to like talk to somebody else. Like you're here now and we're here together. It's not about, oh, there's this magical influence. It's about God speaking through me to speak to you. Anyways, in my household, we grew up kind of very conservative, and watching porn is not acceptable. My parents weren't they weren't watching me like a hawk a lot, so I kind of got away with a lot of things. And because I'm the middle child, they kind of believe the better of you, I guess. So that turned into something that became a daily thing for me. By like fourth grade, I kind of figured out how to masturbate, and I could orgasm without ejaculation at fourth grade, which is kind of crazy to think about that that's something that can happen to somebody. Obviously, no one's testing that except for, I mean, there actually was somebody back in the 60s that did that to people, which is weird. But, and then kind of on that note, once I started getting into high school, it really weighed on me because I had this conflict of wanting to do this compulsively and growing up in a church that they weren't very judgy. They loved me. They loved you regardless of what you're going through, because a lot of churches today, you see them, they're kind of like fire and brimstone, and my church was never like that. There was obviously a don't do this, but it was less about you're a horrible person because you did this, and more of this leads to bad things. And no one ever was in my head saying you're a horrible person because of this. I think it was more of, I see what I'm doing and I know based on what I'm being told, even though I'm not telling them what I'm doing, that it's wrong. And I think it was July 4th of 2014, I told a friend, like, we were coming back from Red, White, and Boom, which is like this big 4th of July thing. I told her, I wrote on a notes, like a notes app on an iPhone, because back then all I had was an iPod. And I wrote and I said, I'm going to kill myself if I can't stop doing this because I don't want to do this. And in my head, I think I thought of it as like a motivation to push myself to stop. Like, oh, if I have this gigantic force forcing me to stop, then I'll stop because I want to stop.
Stop masturbating?
Yes, stop masturbating and stop watching porn. And up until then, like I was very involved in church. I went to 2 mission trips. Every single year, I would go to a fine arts convention in Anaheim and in Orlando at that point. So I was very involved, and I was always an affectionate, like, caring person to everyone I was around. And I think that part of it was sexual, but it was not sexual. It was just the drive of wanting to meet people where they're at. So that was July when I told somebody how I felt. And I didn't really see it as wrong. Now I see it as like, that's a red flag. That's worrying. The following February, it kind of like drifted in my head and I didn't think about it. I even went past the 6 months, I didn't even think about it. But that, like, the equation of like, if I have this force, then I'll stop, was still there. The February of the following year, 2 kids in my school committed suicide within 2 weeks of each other. It was, I think, February, and one Monday I come to school. My first period that year was choir, and it was dead silent. The whole school, everywhere, it's like was cutting into you. And both kids ended up being from band. I was in band too. I played the clarinet. They both played trombone. One was a freshman, one was a junior. The first one was a junior, I think. It was a long time ago. You kind of just remember them together. They kind of blur. But he committed suicide, and then 2 weeks later, we came back to school, and it happened again. And I think, like, for someone now looking back at my life, I saw firsthand how it affects people. I saw how this hurts people, even if it wasn't meant to. It was meant to like escape from their pain, whatever it was. People didn't understand why both of them did it, but they both hung themselves. And they didn't really know each other. It was not a planned thing. No one thinks that. They weren't close. They kind of just were both in band, both played trombone. So later on that year, with knowing that like I've seen this, at the time I worked as a janitor for my church. They had a daycare, and I would go in 4 hours a night and clean. It was very nice to have that kind of responsibility for myself at 16 or 17. And it was October 21st, and I think I was just in a low point. And I told a friend, Daniel, I was talking with him about it. And another friend, Sarah, who I spent more time with, she had a history of mental health, I think mostly around anxiety. And she called me because her dad was on the police force. Daniel had told Sarah that I was talking about suicide, or at least talking in a very like depressed tone. And she called me and said, if you don't call me back right now, I'm going to tell my dad to call the police. And he was a policeman at the place I was located. So I instantly saw that and thought, I got to do it now, because if I don't do it now, someone's going to stop me. And I'll get to go to the hospital. Or I didn't really think that far, but I didn't want anyone to stop me. And at this church, it was our secondary building where we held youth and daycare. So at youth group, we did whatever we want, really. We got up on the roof all the time. So I quickly got up on the roof, went to the other end, and it's about 28 feet off the ground. Like it's an older building. They moved to a newer, bigger building. And I stood up there for about an hour, and I called my friend Daniel, and he was really worried for me. And he's just, promised me you won't do anything tonight. And I said, I promise I won't do anything tonight. So I waited till 12 o'clock because I'm legalistic about that, I guess. And he was calling me up until that point, like for 15 minutes. And I just said, like, I started to see policemen pulling in. I later found out that Sarah had went and told her dad, and her dad got on his radio at home and called the local police force to come look for me. And I could see them with their flashlights looking for me around the building. They didn't know what I was going to do. They just knew I was going to do something. And I just was sitting there, so I got up. I'm like, I'm sorry, Daniel, but I got to go. I'm really sorry. I wasn't crying. I think a lot of people, when they do it their first time, it's a little bit cold. Something necessary, something. Like, I've been thinking about this long enough. Why cry anymore? It hurts so much. It hurts so much. Why should I cry anymore? Because it's just going to keep going. And I ended up, I walked to the edge because it's kind of slanted. I walked to the edge and I couldn't push myself. I couldn't do it. So then I walked back and I ran. And so I think I went right foot first. And I think what happened, I didn't black out. I was awake for the whole time. But I think what happened, because it was dark, my right foot kind of like slanted back, and it broke a few bones in my ankle, and I dislocated. And then, because think of it as I'm upright, my right foot caught, and then it kind of like wedged back into my back. And they don't know. It just, things happen. I had a wedge fracture, technically a burst wedge fracture, they're kind of two separate things. But in this moment, if you saw the X-rays, you could see it. The vertebral body of your spine is kind of like building blocks on top of each other. So in my lumbar, which is right here, I had two come together like this, and it wedged down the front of it, top of it, kind of wedged into it, and it crushed it. I didn't really feel any pain there.
Maybe you hit the ground?
Yeah, when I hit the ground, I didn't feel the pain in my back. I felt it on my foot. I had no pain in my back, which sounds weird, but you have your nerve endings in your disc and going through your spinal cord, but your spinal cord, I don't think, feels anything. You kind of feel the tissue around it. You don't really feel the nerves itself, I think. So I ended up getting rushed to about, I think like 3 minutes later, cops ran over with lights like, did you just jump? Did you just jump? And I was like, yeah. And I was kind of screaming at God. I just wanted to die. I hated myself for wanting something like that. And not because...
For wanting what?
For wanting to masturbate and stuff. Because there were, at church camps and stuff, I would often come up and tell my youth pastor and be like, I want to be good. I want to be what God wants me to be. And I'm not. But like I don't see a path forward of how to make this happen, be the person I want to be. I think we all feel that as people, as teenagers, like we want to be something, but we don't know how to get there. Or we're close enough to it that we're just like letting the drive of other people push us in the direction that they want us to go. So the EMTs had come up to me. They got me on the ambulance, put some nerve blocker in my ankle. They didn't know anything about the back yet until I got there. Got an X-ray as soon as I got to Riverside Methodist. They reset my leg, bandaged it up, and then I think that night they had just built a new building there, the Riverside Neuroscience Center. It's more about like back injuries than it is about psychological, obviously. And so I got like one of their brand new, he's like 36 or something like that, which is very young for a neurosurgeon. Like there's a joke that you go do neurosurgery and you come out being 50 years old when you're ready to do it by yourself, because you have med school, residency, fellowship, and fellowship's I think they do 12 years, something like that. It's crazy. But he was very young and he was very good. They were really happy that they got him on their team. And he told me he didn't want to put me in a brace because I was so young. Have you ever known a kid to keep a brace on? No. I'm glad he put it in permanent. I used to be very flexible. I used to be able to put both my legs above my head. Now I can't do sit-ups, but everything else I can pretty much do. He did T11, so your second to last rib, all the way to L4, second to last lumbar joint. So just above my hips. Boom, boom. The surgery was supposed to take 3 hours, took 5. I guess I drank too much milk and my bones were too strong, but not strong enough to not break. And after being there for about a week, and on tons of painkillers, I went to the psychiatric ward. And I remember the first night they rolled me in, it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and I never told anyone these things I had thought before. And I spent an hour talking with the psychiatrist, and he didn't really speak much. He kind of just let me talk, let me spill my guts. And the following morning, I would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning while I was there, because I was in a medical bed, and it would take so much work to get crutches and come out of the bed that I would kind of just wait there till I saw the sun come up. And the first night I got out, it was so early that I could not then no one was up. I couldn't eat food. I couldn't do anything. It was kind of boring, but my back hurt so much I couldn't sleep. So I started this thing where I would look at the building across the street based on the shadow of the building. I could tell what time it was. So like if the shadow was at the third window, I know, oh, it's time to it's 8 o'clock. I can get up. I can go out there. But if it wasn't, I'd wait longer and longer. Most people don't know what it's like in psych ward, and it's almost impossible to describe, but anything can happen. I've been hospitalized 24 times between the age of 17 to 24. That was the first time. I'm kind of doing an overview because they kind of blur together. The first time I stayed, it was like 2 weeks, which was in October. Well, more towards November by that point because I was in the hospital for 2 weeks or a week, like the actual medical hospital. So then in Thanksgiving, I went back because I started throwing up with the medication they started me off, which is Zoloft. They just thought I was depressed. And then in December, the girl that I'd been with, I did not deserve that girl at the time. Let me tell you, she wrote me letters, 40 letters for each day that I would be in the hospital potentially. She wrote a letter for me to read, opening it by each day. She was a good person. She had a heart of gold. And I didn't deserve her at the time, at least. And so that was a real comfort. But then in December, I really wanted to kill myself again, but I didn't want to hurt her. So you kind of have that idea that you hear from Fallen on Stars, like, oh, I don't want to be the grenade that's been given to you and it explodes because I'm too close to you because I love you, but I want to love you because I'll hurt you. So dumb. And I broke up with her Christmas Eve, how kind of me, to get away from her. And then I tried to swallow like 120 acetaminophen pills along with 120 of my mom's Synthroid pills, which, did nothing, because it does nothing. And that was the start. So then after that, I went sent to residency, a residential hospital in Cincinnati. And I spent a month and a half there. They said I had bipolar mixed, but I honestly had never had a high manic episode, which I thought was like that's kind of, as I grew up, when you're young, you kind of accept it because you want an answer. Psychiatrists give you an answer. You take it because you have nothing else to explain your thoughts. And I kind of lived with that diagnosis for a long time. I took Abilify Maintain, which is shot form, that lasts a month for about 2 years. At one point, I took Seroquel for 2 years, and then another 2 years, I took Depakote for 2 years, all of them at the highest doses. When I took Seroquel, I took 400 milligrams at night, 200 in the morning. And when I talk to people that took the same amount, they're like, oh, I was like a zombie. I was dead. I was like barely cognizant. I was in and out of the hospital a lot. I kind of am grateful that I kind of went through that because I met a variety of people that I never would have met. You grew up in a small town in the Midwest in Ohio, and your world is so small. Even when you go to a missions trip, you think that's outside of America. That's another place. But there are places that are like that in America. Especially with like alternative like sexualities and alternative like transgender, stuff like that. You think of it as something outside of your head, and then you meet somebody that's like that and you begin to understand them. I still adhere to my own beliefs. I still adhere to like Christianity and my belief of what that means and like the worthiness to go to heaven. But regardless of what I feel about you, what you do, you're a human being to me. And that's the most important thing, because especially in that moment, like I hated myself, and that made me kill myself because I constantly had a voice in my head telling me that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't worth even being considered. Like when I called friends for help, it sucked because I felt like I would call like everyone I knew in my contact list, and no one would answer because they were busy or they had life going on. And when your depression lasts for so long, it like weighs on other people, even your own family. Like it's so hard. Like it's hard on you, but you also know it's hard on them. And in those moments of where you should be focusing on yourself, you have to focus on like how much of me needing you is going to break our friendship. When I was in and out of the hospital a lot. Also, every time I came out of the hospital, I'd do IOP or PHP, which is intensive outpatient and partial hospitalization programs. With PHP, you're in the hospital for about 8 hours, doing coping skills that are probably not going to help you. Learning how to color like you didn't know how to before. There are a lot of things there that help some people, but they never helped me. Throughout all the years that I was in the mental health system, I tried so many medications, and I did like 3 rounds of ECT. Which is electroconvulsive therapy, where they put electrodes on your head, sometimes 2, sometimes 1, bilateral and unilateral. And they give you a seizure because back in the day, they saw that seizure patients would actually feel calmer after a seizure, which didn't make no sense. And so they started doing it to people, because that makes sense, without any anesthesia. But anyways, I did like 3 rounds of that, where you go from 3 times a week to once every 3 months. And then I did 2 rounds of ketamine treatments, which are much newer. And then I did, before I eventually stopped going, but before I stopped going, I was going to get VNS treatment, which is vagal nerve stimulation, where they put a pacemaker here that wraps a wire around your vagal nerve to regulate your mood. They use it for about 10 or 20 years. They've been using it for epilepsy when there's no way to like mitigate your seizures. And they realized that just how ECT could help epilepsy patients, it could also help psychiatric patients. In April of last year was the last time I went. April of 2022 was the last time that I went to the psychiatric ward. And I no longer take medication. I no longer see a therapist. I don't really struggle with porn, other than just like the temptation. No, not really I've really gotten to a point where it's a struggle, but it's not one I act on anymore. And I mean, most recently, I quit vaping nicotine this past month. I towards the end of February of 2022, I was smoking marijuana, and I was going to a school at OSU for EMT school because I wanted to do EMT work because I never got to go to school. I kind of missed so much school. I missed half of my junior year and 3/4 of my senior year. And when I got out, I really couldn't do much school. I did like 3 classes, one for calc, one for anatomy phys, and one for philosophy. And at a local community college, I never got to actually go to college really. So when I went to when I finally like got stable enough to like always do the dream of being an EMT, I jumped on it. I finally got a scholarship. I got the school I wanted, and I got a job to pay for it, an internship, everything. And then And then, so like it was supposed to start in December. And long story short, like I never got the email that they moved the start date. I was behind. I called them. I was able to go late anyways. And they accused me of threatening the professor outside of school, like at work. And that simply, it just wasn't true. I was angry with him because he made the school difficult in the sense of like, it wasn't my fault I was there late because no one informed me that school had been put up a week earlier. And I lost because of the allegation, which I was not told, like I was put under investigation and no one told me what for. And for about 2 weeks, I was not going to school. I was watching online, and I was put on administrative leave from work as well. I got a call like all on the same day where I lost my scholarship, was expelled from the school, and was fired all on the same day. And it devastated me because it was the last dream I had. Because everything else I wanted to do, I never could do because school it required so much focus that I could not maintain it. I was in and out of the hospital so much, I couldn't handle doing something longer than 3 months. I was in the hospital like every 3 months, I think, on average, probably less than that. I knew no one that went there as much as I did. But when I got fired and expelled and all that, I had smoked weed earlier that year, like the previous year, and I wasn't while I was in school, but I used my tax return to buy like 8 carts from a friend. And so I had I think by that time, 4 or 5 left. So I was just constantly high. Went to church high. Was at my parents' house high. Went to friends' houses high. And because I just could not handle reality at all. Throughout high school and after high school, I was really promiscuous. I think friends would joke with me like I couldn't tell you how many people I slept with. Like it was more than 40, which isn't like, if you talk to some people, that's not a huge number, but it was probably more than 40. And it wasn't with people that I wanted to date or even that I liked. It was more about just feeling that human connection because.
And you were young.
Yeah, I mean, from 17 all the way till. Actually, I lost my virginity when I was 15 with a girl that I was in a long-term relationship with. But after high school, I kind of just was a total, honestly, fuckboy. And I look back on my actions back then, just in terms of just trying to get in your pants, but at the same time, it was really confusing because you want to love people, but you're there to make them feel loved, but making them feel loved is part of what you want. You want to love someone, but you want to be the one that loves them. And I'm still trying to figure out what I was trying to do then, but it was everything from meeting someone behind a gas station just to have sex to drive. I once took 2 hits of a dab pen and drove 2 hours towards Cincy to meet someone to have sex, spent the night, and then drove back. And someone I had not met before. I never done a dab pen at that point, but where you do the dab wax and yeah. I kind of was everywhere. But about 2 years before back in 2022, I think, 2020, I got diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Warranted, just caveat, the doctor I had, he was diagnosing everyone, I felt like, with that every time I went. They do say that it's overdiagnosed. But there were I definitely don't have tantrums, but I am everywhere. At least I was.
Do you think you have borderline personality disorder? Because so many people that have BPD are suicidal, just very similar to how you described.
I think I did. I mean, in January of 2022, I just stopped taking all my meds, and then I smoked a ton of pot, and then I quit that, and then I kind of found stability. I don't think the pot and that is connected, but I think that definitely when I was 17, I was 140 pounds. And I broke my back. I was 140 pounds. And then at my peak, I was 245, and now I'm back to 215. There was a lot of, when you're constantly pumped through medication, you start to wonder, is it the medication making me this way, or is it me? Which is kind of a paranoid thought, but I think I did. Or at least I do. Those aren't things that really personality disorders are developed. They're not something you're born with. I think. With bipolar, that's something you could be born with, but BPD, it's something that happens to you through your environment. And I don't know how I found stability, but I thank God every day I did.
You're doing better now.
I met my wife, Justina. She's been the biggest supporter. In April of 2022, I got out of the hospital and I met her at church. And she kind of she believed in me. She believed that she could see that I was intelligent. I was intelligent. I was a gifted math student in school, but I kind of let everything crumble because I couldn't go to school, and I was kind of just doing odd jobs everywhere. But she believed that I could actually go back to school and that I could do something with my life. And I think having both someone believe me and someone to fight for made life worth living. Because when you're in that thought process of I want to kill myself because nothing's worth doing. Why should I get a job? Why should I go to church? Why should I go around my friends? I'm not going to do anything with my life. I'm not going to go anywhere. I've already burned out all of my ends of paths I could go. I can't keep up the focus to actually make a change in my life, to actually get to a place where I could go to school. Every time I tried, it failed. There's no point. You kind of feel that hopelessness of it's comforting, and it's it's like you're being swaddled, but by chains. I don't know. The hopelessness feels safe because every time you hope, it hurts more than it was being hopeless stagnantly. And that's the scary part should I really trust that this is going to be the time that it's actually going to work out? Because every time I did, where I felt it's going to work out, it blew up in flames. Even when with the school thing, with the EMT school, that one hurt the most because it wasn't my fault. I didn't say anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong, and it blew up in my face, and I didn't know how to correct it. I talked to a friend from church that was a lawyer, and he didn't really have any advice for me, sadly. But I think that if someone was watching this and they're in that moment of just utter dread, they're going through a time where they're in the hospital, out of the hospital, in the hospital, out of the hospital, going to support group, nothing's working. I definitely think that medication can help a lot of people, but I think that therapy usually does more for you than your medication can. With most things, not including trauma-related things. But I think the one thing that really helped me get out of that abyss was being grateful of. So when you go home, it's a normal life, but you often don't think about what you have. You don't think about how much worse life could be. And a lot of people, like when you tell them like, why should I be grateful? A lot of people that have mental health issues, they'll be like, why should I be happy for what I have? There are people in Africa that have nothing, that have no food, no water, no home. How can I be happy about this? And at the same time, how can I be sad that my life sucks when someone has it so much worse than I do? This is a comparison game of like, my life sucks, but well, his life sucks way more. I have nothing to be complaining about. But that doesn't stop you from feeling like shit. Honestly, it doesn't stop you. Your life sucks. Someone's life sucks more. You're the one living your life. Who cares how much worse someone's life is? Yeah, if you're going on and on about it to them, probably dial it back. But like in general, it's okay to feel bad about your life. You know that phrase like, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to think that your life sucks without thinking about someone else's life sucking more.
Why do you think you're doing better now?
Okay. Oh yeah, I am.
I'm asking, right?
I am.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's kind of like walking. Or, I mean, like when a baby learns how to walk, there's a time where you just want to sit down and you don't want to do anything. You get so lazy and you don't want to try to get up again, because every time you try to get up, you just fall. But I think I'm doing great because I have someone to support me, my wife, Justina, and I have a reason to fight, because someone has given me a dream, and every time I've fallen down, I wasn't alone. They said, I know it sucks, but you can keep going. You can keep going. The dream still exists even if you just fell down. Even if the job that you had didn't work out, you can still keep going. And when I was alone through 17 and 24, it felt like I was alone, even though I was like the biggest social butterfly possible. I had tons of friends, and it didn't matter, because when I was alone, I was alone. Now, when I married my wife, we had to like integrate her into my church, and because we did not meet at that church, and we kind of had to blend it together, and we ended up like kind of being secluded. I was so busy all the time, I couldn't go out and see my friends like I usually could, and I kind of got focused on my job, and I kind of let a lot of my friends go, and it hurt because now I was alone again, but I was also busy. So I think being busy helps you a lot too, because sometimes when you're alone and bored, way easier to commit suicide or try to commit suicide or think about committing suicide than it is to be alone and busy. But you always need an anchor, and my wife will always be my anchor in those moments.
What would you say is the most important thing you've learned in all of this?
Most important thing I've learned is to be vulnerable with your journey, because it'll surprise you every time who's going to be willing to support you through it.
Beautiful. All right. Josh, thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
I'm glad you're doing better now.
Me too. I'm really glad.
You seem to be great.
Yeah, I'm in a completely different headspace right now. It's such a blessing, because I thought I'd never get out.